Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Medha Kale. I am visiting faculty at Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Today we are going to look at gender aware development planning. This paper is part of Environment and Society. As the name suggests, the paper or the topic is about how to make the development planning process gender aware or gender sensitive. Before starting the topic, let me tell you a story. In Malaysia, the government of Malaysia decided that the women's participation needed to increase. It needed to increase in agriculture, in fisheries, in aquaculture, pond aquaculture, all the places. So the ministers of the Malaysian state decided that we should open a scheme which is for women where they can start pond aquaculture. Everybody lauded the scheme. Everybody lauded the effort to include women in it. So some women tried to enroll for the scheme. The scheme didn't say women can't apply for the scheme, but none of the women could get through. Everybody started asking questions. Why did it happen? The scheme was so good. Women were allowed to apply. So why didn't women apply? So one person studied the entire scheme and he found that in the scheme it was mandatory that the applicant had to own a piece of land. And there it is. Women could not apply because none of them owned a piece of land. So the scheme, which was for empowerment of them, which was for their own benefit, their own participation and their own empowerment, was actually doing the worse, because in the name of women's empowerment, it had brought a scheme which actually benefited men, because men were the owners of land and none of the women were owners of land. So on paper, the scheme was very good, but on reality, the scheme was faulty one. So this is what happens when the planning is not gender responsive or gender sensitive. So in this topic, we are trying to look at how to make development planning gender responsive or gender aware. Why is it required? We are also going to look at 4 examples of programs which are related to natural resources and try and see how they fare on the scale of how much are they gender sensitive or gender aware. We would also look at some examples where women have been able to benefit from programs that are gender sensitive, and we will see what has been done so that programs become helpful for women. So first, let us see what is gender sensitive planning. Development needs and aspirations of women are different from men. It is very naive to expect that men and women want similar things and the benefits will always reach women if they are told to men. Thus, all development programs must ensure that the benefits of the program directly reach all women. All the programs have to promote women's empowerment, not just by words or not just by announcements. It has to be institutionalized. It means it has to be part of the system. It has to deepen the participation in decision-making process at all the grassroots level and the decision-making level. So gender-sensitive planning is not only including women in every aspect, but making the system gender-responsive. The Constitution of India guarantees equality to all women. It aims to end discrimination of women, and it gives equal opportunities without any discrimination on basis of sex. It's a laudable step on the backdrop of our history of our nation. In almost all cultures, women have been discriminated because of gender. The gender discrimination has resulted in less decision-making powers, less confidence, less control over resources, and lack of opportunities for betterment of their lives. But the discrimination which has happened in past carries forward for many generations. So it is not enough to just announce that all men and women are equal, but it is important to recognize that women have faced discrimination in past. The discrimination that their generations earlier have been faced, the discrimination that was there in the system has repercussions even now. The lack of knowledge, the lack of confidence, the lack of awareness of things, the lack of interest and the lack of technical information results in not accessing the opportunities that are available in present. So the past discrimination affects women in present and in future. So it is very important to recognize this past discrimination and make corrective action. Constitution of India has gone a step further by saying there won't be any discrimination. So there is equality in opportunity. But equality and opportunity will not be enough. We will have to see whether the access to these opportunities is equal. For example, if there is a scheme that has come into a village and the scheme requires women to own a piece of land, do we feel that the access to this scheme will be equal for men and women? Do we think that women will be able to go out and get benefits out of that scheme? So the access has to be ensured to everybody. It can't be that it is advertised in such a manner that only men are able to access. The meetings are held at such a time when women can't go. Or there are restrictions, different kinds of restrictions because of cultural norms that women are not able to access or not able to participate in the processes of development. To share one example, if a group meeting is planned in a village, according to the customs of the village, many women do not enter temples when they are having their periods. This is a cultural norm. It is not sanctioned legally or medically, but still it's a very strong cultural norm. So if you want to ensure participation of all women, the place has to be such where all women come. Many Dalit families and many Adivasi families, women will not enter temples or places of worship or places which are known to belong to high caste people. So when planning meetings or planning events, it is important to ensure that the place is accessible to everybody, considering even abilities, physical abilities and mental abilities. This is called responsive planning. So when there is equality of opportunity, we must ensure equal access to opportunity. And it's not enough to stop at that. Unless the outcomes are equal, we are not going to get benefits to everybody. So our aim has to be equality of outcomes. Then only we can say that we are working towards an equality which is substantive. So substantive equality, which is a principle in the Convention of Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which is more known as CEDAW, is the basis of gender sensitive planning. The planning process which considers women's position, women's restrictions and women's knowledge is called gender sensitive process. It takes into account how and whether they can participate, why they can't participate and what will they contribute, at what level. So gender sensitive planning is a key to ensure equal participation of women in all processes of development. So now we will see some programs which are linked to natural resource management and see whether these programs are able to respond to participation of women or if they are gender sensitive. The major program that we are going to discuss now is the Joint Forest Management and Eco Development Program. You must have heard about the Joint Forest Management Program. It was initiated by the Forest Department for involving local people in the management of forest lands. It is a very major program implemented across the country. Eco Development Program is its equivalent in the areas adjacent to the protected areas, which are wildlife sanctuaries and national parks. In both these programs, it is expected that at least 50% members of the JFM general body should be women, meaning wherever there are joint forest management general bodies, 50% members have to be women. At least 33% membership in the JFM Executive Committee should be filled amongst the women members. One more important step that has been included in the project is that one of the office bearers, either the president or the chairman or the secretary, has to be woman member of the committee. These provisions were included as part of the gender sensitive planning of the program. It was expected that if these things are made mandatory, more women will participate in these committees, and once they start participating, there will be change in the ways in which the committees function. Women's voices will be heard, women's knowledge will be recognized, and they can participate with their daily interactions, they can participate, they can make decisions, and because they are office bearers, they will control the working of the committee. This was on paper. So let's see what happened on the ground. What was the ground reality? In Bina Agarwal's word, it was participatory exclusion rather than participatory inclusion. So why did this happen? If we look across the country, we see that women are not even nominal members and constitute less than 10% of most JFM general bodies. So leave presidentship or secretaryship or any executive committee membership, women are not even reaching the nominal membership of the committee. In West Bengal, it was seen that 60% of the JFM groups did not have any women representation. Neither the landless families were represented. So the entire effort to include women and those landless families who do not have access to resources was completely futile. In different states, the situation was different. But if we look at it collectively, more often than not, men were controlling decisions and men were favored over women. Wherever women were present in the committees, was the situation different? Even there, men were taking almost all important decisions without even consulting women. So their membership was just for the sake of their names. See, all these lapses are serious in nature and they violate the basic principles of gender inclusion in natural resource management. So this is what happened to joint forest management. Now let's go to the next program, which is the social forestry program. Social forestry program was started on a backdrop of severe fuel crisis faced by women. It was initiated to reduce women's drudgery and also ensure wage employment. Fuel wood has been in use in India and across other nations as basic source of fuel for cooking, not just in rural areas but also in urban areas. It is required because there is lack of LPG connections and kerosene. So many women and many households still depend on fuel wood, agricultural waste and dried animal dung. So to provide for fuel wood and to protect forests from over-exploitation, a program was initiated for afforestation of barren lands for fuel wood and fodder plantations. This was called social forestry. The guidelines said that ensuring seats for women representatives as chairpersons of the groups and ensuring almost 50% representation of the women in executive committees as in JFMCs. So as JFMCs, Joint Forest Management Committees, even in social forestry committees, the guidelines said that at least 50% should be women members and representation in executive committee. But what happened on the ground? Did it really translate into women's participation? Let's see what happened. We can best describe this experience as defeating the purpose itself. Women were employed in work. They found employment, but did not have equality in participation in decision making. Where to plant, which trees to plant, how to take care of them, when to sell, when to cut, all these decisions were taken by men and hardly any women were involved. Women had almost no control on what is to be planted or harvested and how much funds were to be utilized for what purposes. Women almost felt excluded from the very plantations that they had raised and protected. They had put in their labor, they had put in their time to raise these plantations, protect these plantations so that there will be afforestation and their fuel and fodder needs will be responded to. How to defeat the purpose is the best example of social forestry. Mistaken concepts of banning the wood cutting or tree cutting actually resulted in barring the entry of women to these forests. Even the men-dominated bodies tried to bar entry to the women to collect fuel wood or graze animals in fuel lots and fodder lots, even when that was the main purpose of the scheme. The scheme was launched because the need of the fuel wood was grave and it was to provide fuel and fodder for households. So by barring women entry and by banning the grazing of animals and banning the fuel wood cutting, the actual purpose of the scheme was defeated. This is the best example of not listening to women's needs, not understanding their needs, and not understanding the purpose of the scheme. So this entire exercise of social afforestation has had many benefits, but hardly any women benefited from it because they neither got the fuel nor the fodder. Their labor was used, they put in their labor, they got some wage, but the entire purpose was defeated. So now let's look at the Integrated Watershed Management Program. This is a very important program in terms of water conservation. Millions of women in India spend many hours daily to get adequate water for household. Therefore, watershed management is one of the most important programs which should benefit women. So what is watershed development? It refers to the conservation, regeneration, and the judicious use of all the resources. Natural resources like land, water, plants and animals, and human within a particular watershed. So it is not only about regeneration of water resources, but also conservation of all other natural resources within a particular watershed. This program is crucial considering the famines and droughts that we have faced recently. Many areas in India, many states in India have faced continuous droughts and lack of water. The exploitation of groundwater has resulted in acute crisis of drinking water and also water for irrigation. So watershed management is a very crucial program which will benefit many families and mostly the women who carry water for their households. The guidelines of these programs, like others, said that women should be involved at all levels, from state and district watershed development committees to local committees in the village. Here also it was expected that 1/3 representation in the committee should go to women. What happened in this program? Let us see. What happened on the ground level was that women worked very hard. They put in labor because the program completely depended on Shramadan from villagers, where villagers came in voluntary, worked on the sites, dug in soak pits, dug in ponds, constructed nala bunds and tried to conserve water. Women were at the forefront. They put in hard labor. But did they benefit from the program? Did they get water for which they worked? Let us see what happened. So this program we can best describe as only pain and no gain, because women's participation was limited to laborious work, while men had all the decision-making powers. Source of wage labor was provided by this program, but women could not think of this program as means of changing their livelihood by preserving or protecting the natural resource. As part of the program, in some areas, grazing or wood collection in the forest was banned. There were plantations, there were introduction of new exotic trees, which created problems for marginal and landless women. For them, they depended for fodder and fuel and firewood on these forests, but the complete ban on grazing and tree cutting was a problem for landless and marginal women. Women actually gained very little after a long period, as watershed mainly helped farming. It had negative impact, adverse outcomes for pastoral and NTFP dependent households. So an important program didn't consult women's needs, did not have them in leadership roles, did not look at their needs as collectors of water for the household and farming, and therefore it failed to address women's needs and actually didn't respond to their ideas of water conservation. They failed to understand women's expertise in this issue and did not benefit them at all. Now let us look at local biodiversity management committees. This is a recent program compared to others. Biological Diversity Act 2002 mandates that all local bodies to set up biodiversity management committees, which are called BMCs, for planning, conservation and management of local biodiversity. This act also mandates 1/3 women representation in 6-member committee, SC/ST reservation as per the state demography, and also documentation of biodiversity and traditional knowledge of the people as major tasks. If any commercial utilization of biological resources is expected, the Act says that the village can enter into a contract with any corporate to share the benefits. This is relatively a new act and has not been implemented in all parts of the country, so it is difficult to see what effects it has got. But what we can describe this program as is feared failure. Why we are saying this, let us go to that now. Like other programs as joint forest management or integrated watershed management or social forestry, local biodiversity management committees are also feared to take the same path and exclude women from participation. It is believed that there won't be any major efforts made to ensure that women participate in this. In fact, women's knowledge of forests and biodiversity is so rich that their participation will definitely benefit the entire community and the village that they reside in. But there are chances that this is not going to happen, and actually there is a fear clause that allows the village to commercialize the biological resource is actually a threat to the intellectual property rights of women and the marginalized communities. So we have to watch carefully how this act also and this program also works on the ground level and includes women into it as the beneficiary. So looking at these programs, we can conclude that if the gender sensitive planning does not work at outcomes, it can just remain words on paper. Because the law makes it mandatory, the constitution guidelines make it mandatory, it is very easy to put in gender component in each program. But gender component just cannot be added. It has to be integrated into the system and into the thinking of those who are implementing the programs. It's very easy to have women members, but if you don't let them work and if there are no decision-making powers given to these members, it's very difficult to reach the benefits out to other women. Have all other programs failed on making it gender sensitive? So now we are going to look at some programs which can be said as success stories of gender sensitive planning. So right now what we will do is we will start with the Kutumbashree program. Kutumbashree is a major program implemented by the Kerala government in the state of Kerala in India. The aim was to wipe out absolute poverty through concerted community action under the leadership of local self-governments. It is considered to be the largest women empowering projects in India. Almost 41 lakh members are part of the program, covering more than 50% of the households of the state. Three critical components of the Kutumbashree are credit, entrepreneurship, and empowerment. The success of the program lies in the fact that it could involve women's collectives into the program by encouraging wage employment, by distributing credit, and empowering women with different skills. Let's see how they did it. Kutumbashree was able to mobilize women and men for planning implementation of Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme in Kerala. The Manarega scheme is a crucial scheme in creating wage employment and also doing water conservation. Kutumbashree emphasized the fact that women would like to work as collective rather than as individuals. So they employed women's collectives for wage employment, through which women gained new skills to make farm bunding, dig soak pits, build cattle sheds and basement of houses. These skills were useful in accessing employment in other areas and also securing wages for their own households. Kutumbashree women worked for building ponds, wells, restoration of rivers and afforestation activities. In this process, women have learnt many new skills, they've earned income and became independent due to rise in income level. So a program that is gender sensitive, which includes women into planning and monitoring and implementation of program, can result in better outcomes for women. It can result in increased incomes, increased confidence and increased independence if the program is implemented well. The vast scale of the program also was important in terms of reaching benefits to most women. Reaching out to more than 50% of households was the key of mass level empowerment that we see in Kerala because of the Kutumbashree program. The program and the wage employment focused on conservation of natural resources and worked on improving productivity of land, conservation of water and regeneration of natural resources. This was not useful only for women households but also others who were into farming and other livelihoods which are based on natural resources. So Kutumbashree is a good example of how involvement and active participation of women can lead to better outcomes. The next example that we are going to look at is a group of tribal women from Odisha. These tribal women's groups were formed at Panchayat level. They are called Mahila Mandals. They have been doing that, traditionally they have been making brooms from grass that they get from the forests around them. These are all tribal women's groups, but they have faced severe harassment from the forest officials and other middlemen who are into the occupation. So what happened is the NGO Agragami, which has been working for last 30 years, helped these Mahila Mandals get in touch with a collective at Panchayat levels and work together. The collective is called Ama Sangathan. The Mahila Mandals joined hand with Ama Sangatans and decided to advocate for their cause. They decided to challenge the harassment by forest officials. They met the chief minister, they met the other bureaucratic machinery and put in their demands. What happened later was the advocacy with the state resulted in delisting of 60 items on the non-timber forest produce list, including the grass required for brooms. This was a major boost for women's groups. With the end of middlemen, women's bargaining power also increased. The NGO provided for basic training in broom making and marketing. This saw a rise of almost 300% in the price of the brooms. So when women come together, put forth their demands on their own, lead the programs and advocate at the state level, the impact is completely different and the process is completely different. Because in that process, women learn so much. They learn new skills, they learn ways to handle people, they learn ways to bargain and advocate for their own cause, which in turn results in better outcomes for themselves and their households. Another very important factor of the program was because their incomes had increased and they were in better control of the situation, they no longer needed to get into contracts which were almost like slavery with the forest officials and contractors. So we can see when tribal women came together, the way they planned their program was in itself an effective way of collective action and getting women together. Now we will see what happened with the fisherwomen cooperatives in different states, coastal states of India. Many cooperatives of fisherwomen have been in operation in Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala and Maharashtra. These cooperatives were formed because there was lot of harassment, lot of exploitation of fisherwomen into the fishing occupation. On the backdrop of commercialization of fishing, loss of common spaces and changing nature of coastline due to development, it has resulted in destabilizing the important role of fisherwomen in their livelihoods, and it has threatened their livelihoods. So these cooperatives were formed to mobilize women and form collectives. Or one assistance that these cooperatives provided was short-term assistance and short-term credit assistance. The entire management of funds, allocation of loans, repayment of loans was supervised by the borrowers themselves. There were no middlemen involved. They were not at the mercy of money lenders, and their role as decision makers in the activity also increased their confidence and made them proud of being leaders on the program. But they didn't stop at distributing money. They also took cognizance of the hardships faced by fisherwomen into their daily lives. So some organizations started transport services, like Matsya in Kerala and cooperatives in Ratnagiri started transport facilities. Why was it important for fisherwomen? If we observe, even in our daily travels, fisherwomen find it very difficult to use public transport because of the fish load that they carry. It is heavy, it smells, and it is not very convenient to travel by the public transport. So this important step of starting transport specifically for fisherwomen was a great step in easing their troubles and making their lives much more easier. It created better access to market, better access to selling points, and it also provided women with their own transport service. Other opportunities created for fisherwomen are seen in Odisha and Bengal. These two states have traditionally known that women take care of ponds in their own households. So there is an effort to boost pond aquaculture in this area, which will use women's traditional knowledge of fishing and of aquaculture using ponds in the backyards. There are other programs which use women's skills in making products out of fish, like fish wafers, pickles, cutlets, and dried fish, and selling these through women's collectives. These programs have received better response from government facilities, hotels, because of the expertise involved and also because of the involvement of women and transparent accounting practices. So all these programs tell us how women's collectives can make a difference. From Kerala, now we will head to Himalayas. So let's look at what the hill farmers in Himalayas did in Chamoli district of Himalayas. Here, the traditional knowledge of making jams, pickles, marmalades, green tea was used and a basic training was provided for the hill farmers. The idea was from harvest to packaging. So all the activities and all the processes are handled by women. The produces and the raw material is procured by women and the final product is sold by women. So this important program trains women, gives them better skills in marketing and production, and also allows them to sell their product at various outlets in the state. So the hill farmers of Himalayas has been able to encourage women to get into agro processing, get into food processing and fruit processing and get benefits out of those initiatives. So from whatever we've learned in this topic, let's wrap up. We've seen how gender sensitive planning is important for better outcomes for women in all processes of development. We've seen that the Convention of CEDAW and the Constitution of India both want equality for women. They guarantee equality of opportunity for women. But we need to go a step further and work towards equality of outcomes. We have to consider past discrimination while planning any development process and consider women's needs, including the cultural norms that govern women, their traditional occupations, the marginalization that they have faced over years, and their actual lived reality to plan for better programs. If the development planning and programs are gender responsive, gender sensitive, there will be better outcomes for women and better benefits for women. We've also seen how even effort of incorporating gender sensitivity into programs which are linked to natural resources has not really translated into real outcomes for women. We've looked at joint forest management, we've looked at integrated watershed management, social forestry, and the initiative of local biodiversity management committees. We've seen that just having women on paper or women members on the committee does not translate into benefits reaching women. It needs a real interest in women's knowledge, it needs recognition to women's work, and it also needs recognition and sensitivity to respond to their special needs. We also looked at 4 initiatives from different states of India where they have successfully implemented programs, including women as leaders, and these programs have resulted in better outcomes in terms of income, increased skills, increased incomes for households, and increased confidence in women. So if the gender component is not just on paper but also in the minds of those who implement programs, we can definitely achieve much more than just writing it in our reports. Gender is not something to be added after the program has been designed. It has to be incorporated as an essential aspect of any work that we do. Unless and until we do that, we are not going to change the ways in which we have been working till date, and it won't reach women who have been toiling hard in farms, on coasts, in hills, in fishing line, in forests. If we have to reach the benefits to women, the leadership has to be in hands of women and the planning has to be gender sensitive. If you want to read more about this, do refer to the e-text and also the Learn More section. I hope you've enjoyed the session and I thank you for that.